June 12, 1943. Newton's third law of motion dictates that whenever one object exerts a force on another object, the second object exerts an equal and opposite force on the first. It seems that the Axis powers, especially the German Nazis, are testing if this law applies to geopolitics, and what they're learning is that it doesn't apply. The response to the force you exerted may very well be amplified in strength and become superior to your own, like in the air over Germany this week, or the object that you're attacking might just disappear right in front of your eyes, slip away like ghosts, to strike again, like in occupied Yugoslavia and Greece. Before we start today's program, here's a word from the Time Ghost Army.
Never forget. Never give up. Never surrender. Join the Time Ghost Army.
This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus, Olsson. Last week, the Nazis liquidated the Lvov ghetto, killing 3,000 and deporting 7,000 more. In Auschwitz-Birkenau, Josef Mengele was installed as medical officer, tasked to decide who shall die immediately or face the slow death of torture in the camp. The ranks of resistance movements continued to grow across Europe. It was such a resistance movement that the anti-partisan Operation Black, or Operation Schwarz, in occupied Yugoslavia aimed to destroy. This week, the Axis also tried to subdue another partisan force further southeast in Greece. The Greek People's Liberation Army, or ELAS, have grown to a force of between 12 and 15,000, mainly spread out in central Greece, Epirus, Macedonia, and Thessaly. The latter has been almost fully liberated from Axis occupiers, save for three big cities of Larissa, Volos, and Trikala. But all in all, roughly 465,000 of 590,000 Greeks in Thessaly now live in relative freedom. Struggling to contain ELA's progress, on June 8th, the Italian occupiers launched an offensive on ELA's positions in Porta and Musaki in western Thessaly. During the first 48 hours of the battle, the Italians take significant losses. Anticipating Italian reinforcements and to avoid being surrounded, ELA's forces pull back to the mountains. The Italians don't pursue, fearing a partisan trap. Instead, the Italians turn on the civilians and burn Porta and other nearby villages to the ground. The Italian Pyrrhic victory does, however, spell the end to any attempts to drive out ELAS from the Thessaly countryside for now, and the Italians begin confining themselves to the relative safety of the occupied cities. While ELAS slip away to the northwest in the Sukiecka Valley, the situation for Tito's partisans is increasingly precarious. They can only barely hold the bridgehead across the Sukiecka River as they come under heavy fire from German air raids and reinforcing ground troops. The bridgehead provides a 5-kilometer corridor for escape, but as the Axis forces continue to amass around the valley, it looks increasingly impossible to break out in that direction. Tito and his militia are in practice surrounded. His forces are split in two. The 1st and 2nd Proletarian Division, including Tito's supreme headquarters, on the west side of the Pivat River. On the other side are the 3rd Partisan Shock Division, the 7th Proletarian Division, and the Mobile Central Hospital with 3,000 wounded. Tito and the first group will try to break out to the northwest towards the least defended part of the encirclement at the Foča-Kalinovic road. On the other side of the river, the second group will have to try to break out to the northeast in the direction of the Drina River. On the 7th, German commander Lütters receives reports of captured partisans 7 kilometers northwest of Tientiste. Confronted with another potential front, he sends his last available forces, the 369th Legionary Division, to defend the Foča-Kalinovic road. The next day, the 1st Partisan Division forced their way across the Milinklade hills towards Zelengora. To their south, the 2nd Division is advancing towards Bare, near Volujak. The second group begins to move northeast. On June 9th, the Germans launch a massive assault into the Sukiecka Valley from several points. The 1st Division begins crossing Milinklade. and Tito is wounded, but not out of action when incoming ordnance explodes near his position. A few kilometers further south at Bare, the 2nd Division comes in contact with the 118th Jäger Division, and a pitched battle develops. On the opposite side of the valley, the 2nd Group encounters insurmountable Axis resistance and are driven into retreat back towards Kentište. They have already been forced to leave behind several hundred of the wounded and dozens of nurses caring for them, and yet the retreat is slow, with still over 2,000 wounded, as well as doctors, nurses, and civilians among their ranks. On the 10th, the 1st Division surprised the forward German troops of the 118th Jäger on the northwestern side of Millinklade and strived to break through towards the Foča-Kalinovic road. The gap in the German line allows parts of the 2nd Division to begin their escape, while the 7th and parts of the 3rd try to break through west of Kentište. A large part of the 3rd Partisan Shock are forced to take up defensive positions in Kentište to try to protect the central hospital. By the end of this week, the remaining forces of the 1st, 2nd, and 7th, as well as parts of the 3rd, have reached the Foča-Kalinovic road. By the 12th, they are only fighting the under-equipped remainder of the German 369th Division, who are barely holding them back. Behind them in the Suceska Valley, several thousand partisans, including the central hospital, and hundreds of civilians are completely surrounded and preparing for what they know is a last stand. 2 days earlier, Luthers issued an order stating that no able-bodied man is to leave the cauldron alive. While the Axis forces have failed to apply that order to the breakout forces, it makes the prospect for the defenders in Kentište all the grimmer. Grim is also the best way to describe the prospects for the population in Bengal, British India. By now, there's hardly any affordable food to be found in the countryside. More and more people are falling ill with starvation or even dying. Meanwhile, rumors about an impounding collapse of the Burma Road continue to circulate. Instead of disproving this or offering relief, the government does something that seems to confirm the rumors while at the same time worsening the situation in rural Bengal. They announce a food drive to locate hordes, to stimulate the flow of grain from agriculturalists to the markets, and to organize the distribution of local surpluses as loans or by sales to those who were in need of food grains. A freshly created militia of 8,000 government employees begin to scour the countryside to requisition illegal stocks. In practice, anything judged to be withheld from a market can be seized. In Calcutta, which is exempted, many see this as a confirmation that the British are stealing food to reinforce the valuable strategic city of Calcutta and its industry for a last defense when the Burma front collapses. As the events unfold, it doesn't look like it's the villagers in the provinces who are considered to be in need. Most of the discovered contraband stocks aren't redistributed to feed the hungry, but are taken to Calcutta. In a sad, ironic twist, that is already where most of the stockpiles of food were piled up by private and government hoarders, and where food is much less scarce and expensive anyway. While this famine continues to accelerate, another one is possibly seeing a near end. Back in 1941, Iran was occupied by the British and Soviets. Their occupation put a huge strain on Iranian infrastructure as it soon became a main supply route for Soviet Lend-Lease material. Civilian transportation, including food trade, was sidelined by the demands to get through arms. Then, in 1942, the harvest fails, and a famine accompanied by a typhus epidemic descends on the country. The British and Soviet government failed to deliver significant food aid. Now, in June 1943, the famine and typhus epidemic are still raging, and millions of Iranians have succumbed to famine and disease. However, it looks like the new summer harvest is expected to be sufficient and will bring relief. But 2 years of hunger and disease has left Iran in turmoil. Widespread chaos has led to tribal uprisings in the south, and the Iranian government is on the verge of collapse. The Iranian famine is an event that has largely gone unnoticed, despite it being a great tragedy that cost millions of lives and affected millions more. We will shortly tell you the whole story in a dedicated special episode. In any case, while the United Nations allies might be failing to deliver bread, they are all the more successful at delivering bombs over Germany. On June 11, another massive air raid is carried out, this time on Düsseldorf. 130 acres of the city are claimed to be destroyed by 783 aircraft. Düsseldorf city officials record close to 9,000 separate fire incidents, 1,444 of which are classified as large fires. Around 140,000 people lose their homes and 1,292 people are killed. On June 11th, U.S. heavy bombers target Cuxhaven and Wilhelmshaven, destroying parts of the historic cities, and on June 12th, 503 RAF aircraft bomb Bochum, killing 312 more people. Once again, the cost in bombers and aircrews is high. The attack on Düsseldorf alone comes with 48 RAF aircraft lost, good for 5% of the total force. A heavy bomber aircraft like the Handley Page Halifax has a crew of up to 7 servicemen. For the Düsseldorf air raid, that means that up to 200 airmen have been rendered out of action. The deadly bombing campaigns might be a precursor to liberation, but for many living under Nazi control, that's nothing but a utopian dream. While Berlin was officially declared Judenfrei on the 19th last month, there were still several thousand whom the Nazis would consider to be Jewish in the city, among them a group of 500 employees and patients in the Jewish Community Hospital. On June 10th, they are deported to Theresienstadt camp and ghetto. Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler has designated this to be an alibi camp, to counter Allied claims of inhumane living conditions and active genocide. So life is slightly better than in other camps and ghettos. With the change towards death by slavery in general, the focus is to concentrate the able-bodied to where the Nazis need them, separating them from their families. This is the fate of the Lopez Diaz family, Jews of mixed Portuguese and Dutch origin in the Netherlands. The father, Leendert, was taken to a Dutch labor camp in early 1942. In October, he was deported to occupied Poland to work in the coal mines, where he was then worked to death during the next 2 months. In January this year, his wife, Esther Lopez Diaz van Bezem, and their 2 daughters, Greta, 22 years old, and Adele, nicknamed Ali, aged 12, still living in their apartment, are informed that Leendert has died. In May this year, 1943, they are to be taken to the Vught labor and concentration camp. A neighbor offers to take Ali in and to hide her. Esther declines, convinced that she will be able to take care of her little girl. They are, after all, in part from neutral Portugal and have applied for exemption status to be allowed to go to her husband's family there. So the camp is surely just a temporary hurdle before they are allowed to leave. The conditions at Vught are difficult. The camp holds mostly women, children, the infirm, and elderly. The children are kept separate from the grown-ups, with only infants allowed to stay with their young mothers. Discipline is hard, with corporal punishment for anyone that doesn't follow the guards' orders immediately. Theft of the few personal property they have brought along is frequent. The food is insufficient and of the lowest possible quality. Sanitation is rudimentary at best. Disease, lice, and parasites befall the incarcerated, and death is a constant companion to daily life. At one point, a guard discovers lice on Ali and some other girls while they are eating in the canteen. The girls are torn from the table, and the female guards beat them with sticks to get them into the courtyard as fast as possible. There, they are forced to undress. Naked, humiliated, the tween and teen girls are sprayed with a delousing gun that gets into their eyes, mouths, and lungs, sending them coughing and temporarily blinded. They are forced to dress in the now deloused clothes so fast that with tearing eyes and under the threat of more beatings, they don't even manage to get into their own underwear. Ali goes to bed that evening in someone else's clothes that are too big, that reek of the pesticide and cling to her body like sticky bags. By early June, the children's section of the camp is far beyond capacity. On the 5th, the Jewish camp administrators post a notice to the other inmates. It is with our deepest regret that we must inform you about a horrendous misfortune that has befallen us. On high command from elsewhere, all children aged between 0 and 16 years must leave the camp to be housed, we were told, in a special children's camp. The youngest, under 4, will be accompanied by their mothers. Children between 4 and 16 will be accompanied by one parent. There is hope for the Lopez Diaz women, though, as the notice reads, Exempted can be only half-Jews, those who are involved in or have asked for an Abstammungsverfahren, descent process. The administrators also plead for calm. We ask you to therefore kindly keep order and to remain calm as far as is possible so that we will be spared from the risk of even more serious evil from harsh SS orders. Later, the same day, the camp inmates are lined up in the central courtyard, and in a grueling long process, the names of the over 3,000 deportees are read out. Ali and Esther are on the list. Greta is not. After roll call, Ali seems resigned to their fate. She arranges with one of her friends that they will try to sit together on the train. The two older women have not given up, though, and make their way to the camp commander's office. Their status is confirmed as under investigation, and a clerk promises to look into it. The next day, the human cargo for the first train is rounded up, and again, Ali and Esther are on the list. Greta rushes to the offices again to make a protest. She manages to make it back just in time. She breaches the line of SS men with dogs and rushes to her sister and mother. In the confusion, the released dogs don't get to her, and the women take farewell in a final embrace. They promise to try to see each other soon again. After all, the notice also promises. Finally, we inform you that there is good hope that the children will be housed within this country, and the parents can return if they so desire. Like Ali's hope of sitting with her friend, practically sitting at all in the filthy cattle wagons, that is a false hope. Greta will never see her mother and sister again. A few days later, they and the two transports arrive at Sobibor in occupied Poland, where row after row of the 1,296 infants and children and around 1,800 parents, mostly mothers, the sick and elderly, are marched into the gas chambers and murdered. Greta will survive deportation to Auschwitz-Birkenau. After the war, she will recover Ali's friendship album. Of the 19 girls and one boy who wrote in Ali's book, only 6 survived the war. In 1945, Greta adds a last entry before she preserves it until her death in 2010, aged 90. Dear Ali, to my great sorrow, this is the end of your album, of a great destiny. Although you are dead, I will never ever forget you. You will always remain in my heart. As long as I live, I will keep this album. Rest in peace, my darling. That is the wish of your dearly loving sister, Greta. Never forget.